What we've got here is a multi-track session, and you'll have about 6 tracks in your file. You can see this file across the top. It's the facilitated interview. You can see from here to here, approximately, it's about 11 minutes long. But I needed to pick up transitional sounds, so I just left the recorder running here at the end. So I'm going to edit this, and it's part of track 1, which I've renamed from track 1. You can see I've named it raw tape. And it's part of it's the sit down interview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pieces that I want from this track, and if I want this piece of tape and this piece of tape and this piece of tape, I'll take it and I'll just drag it down here. This is how I edit. And then I'll delete everything on track 1. And then what I'll do is I'll do the show me interview, which is next here. So you can see sit down interview, show me interview, room tone and ambi, captured sound effects, and then your voice, your tracking. So you can see I've labeled each individual thing, tracks. So you might not have seen that before, but that's it a little bit closer up. So all you'll do is you'll edit these one at a time. Start with your raw tape, drag the parts down into, in this case, the track that you'll need it. Here, watch this. When you highlight this part in purple, you can click and drag it up and let it go. And now the show me interview moved up and the sit down interview material moved down. And when I'm done, culling all of my raw tape, then I can start to put everything in order. So when I'm looking for room tone and ambi, I can find it on a track and then drag it to room tone and ambi. It might be easier to just drag it down. Let's say this is room tone and ambi, and I highlight that. I can take it and then move it down to room tone and ambi. Or if I had just left it where it was, yes, you can edit in any you can edit in any fashion that you want. You could have said, "Oh, this is room tone and ambi here." Well, then I need to just take it and I need to make sure I put it on the track that says room tone and ambi. And then you can start editing. To hear one track at a time, it might be easier to solo a track that you're listening to. So if I wanted to listen to just the raw tape, I could click on S, and it would only allow me to hear what's on track 1. It solos that track. Another thing I could do if I wanted to hear 2 tracks, I could mute, let's say, tracks 3 and 4, a room tone track, and I could mute, let's say this track here, I could mute it. And then these 2 tracks are the only ones visible. So you can mute it with M or solo it with, you can mute it with the letter M and it mutes the entire track, or you can solo the track with S only. You can have a combination of all these things. But remember, if you can't hear the audio, you can only see it. You need to make sure, well, is this button on or is this button off? Why can I not hear it, or how come I can only hear it? It's probably because your mute and solos are on. About 10 minutes later, I've chopped all this up. From those 11 or so minutes, I only have grabbed these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I haven't edited them yet. It's just the basic show parts. So I'm going to do that with the sit-down interview, the raw interview, and all the other sound effects that I've got. All right, it's a few moments later, and I've decided to keep things as simple as I can, and I wanted to pull the files in. When you pull a file in to start listening to it, what you can do is I'm dragging from the folder off to the side that you can't see. I'm dragging it, and I just drag it right onto the canvas, and it's there. And once it shows up there, it also shows up in your playlist over here. Or you can drag it directly in the playlist in case you don't want it on your canvas, and it's here, and then you can drag it over when you want it. This is a few minutes later, and you can see that I've got everything. It's a little cleaner now. But you'll notice I've only got 2 things. Here in the top left corner, you can see carefully, you can see I've only got my tracking done. This is my spoken voice. And then the sit-down interview. These are going to be the biggest pieces of the pie. So even though I know I'll need sound effects and all of those things and room tone, and just forget about that. Lay down your tracks first and lay down the interview that's going to go in between those tracks. Make sure you get all of that stuff down in the order you want with the takes you want. And then you add your ambience, your seeing, your sound effects, and your room tone. I just wanted to show you, if you wanted to start editing more linearly along the timeline of your script, you can start to move things over and then pull them into place as you need them. So I do that by hitting Control A, and then right-clicking and moving everything over. And then I'll start to do active editing on the pieces that I've got. and it makes assembly a little bit easier. If I wanted to move just a portion of some of these things, I'll left click and drag, let's say, through these files, and I can click and drag them off to the left or right or whatever I want to do. When I need them, I'll have them. Okay, it's a few minutes later, and I'm almost done. I've got all the pieces in order. I've got levels, layers, and ambi to polish, but I'm going to do another save. So here at the top, you may be able to see this in the top left. You can see how this is named. That's the name that I've given the file, but it says V2. Before I do the final polishing edits, I'm actually going to go to File and Save As, and I'm going to give this the next name. So I'm going to give it a name as V3. This way, if I made a mistake and I wanted to find an earlier version, I could go back to version 1 or version 2 or version 3. Yes, you can go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, but a lot of times it's good to just kind of save what you're doing often, save a different version of it as you go along, so that by the time you go, instead of saying, gee, what's the final version, you'll know the highest number. I've gotten up to 29 on these things. Version 29 is the final version because that's the last mix. So you don't have to name it final version 1, final version 1.0. Now, your naming conventions will vary from shop to shop, but generally, this is how I've done it to keep track of assets a little bit easier. Okay, so here it is. This is the final mix. You can see we've got the tracking here. This is my recorded voice here, the sit-down interview, the show-me interview parts, the room tone and ambient, the captured sound effects. We're just going to take a quick moment to go through this. The biggest thing you'll see is this on track 4. What is that? Over and over again. I did not get enough room tone. And there was a boiler next to us, and the doors kept coming in and out, and room tone is like complete silence. So I had silence with him thinking and going, I'm not sure. And I didn't want that. So I took this 10 seconds and I looped it over the introduction. Now, this part of the sit-down interview, I have not introduced the first scene. So the temptation would be to use the sound effects that I'd later gathered, but we haven't told the audience we're getting to that thing. So you can't get ahead of the story. So you'll notice that with each edit, there's usually something here that has a little fade in. On almost every sliver of tape, you'll see we fade this sound up and down. We'll say fade that up and down. Even if it's so gradual, you can't notice, but I notice when I zoom in there. And you'll hear it too. So your final edit, you're listening very, very carefully in headphones. You can see I transition. There's the transition sound on this file here. And it's pretty straightforward of that. Acts and tracks with ambience on the bottom, setting sounds on tracks 3 and 4, and then we finish up with this long stretch of active sound here in our scene for the story. So at one glance, you can see this is what we've got, and it's not too long. It took just over an hour for me to pull everything together. All right, so for you, I would say this is totally doable, and I'd also say good luck.